All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig in a Pickle Krug Show with some Niner news. John Lynch spoke today at the combine in Indy on all three of his quarterbacks, and man, when you go through it and you listen to what he said, to me it was really interesting. All right, let's start. He was asked about Jimmy Garoppolo. You know, it was interesting. Where Kyle Shanahan was very terse, very cold, almost agitated in his assessment or his addressing of Jimmy Garoppolo. John Lynch showed a lot more tact. John Lynch showed a lot more warmth. John Lynch was more gracious. And he came out and he said that he admired Garoppolo, he admired his toughness, admired what he was as a teammate, thanked him for his contribution, and then put a nail in the coffin and said it's probably run its course. He didn't allude to the fact that there was any disharmony between Garoppolo and the organization or Garoppolo and Shanahan specifically. He just kind of said it's run its course. He wished him well. He said that he thinks that Jimmy's going to play great football somewhere else. But it was really interesting. He wanted to. John Lynch doesn't say anything accidentally, and he came out and he wanted to acknowledge that Jimmy. They wanted to thank him. He wanted to acknowledge him for his contribution. He wanted to acknowledge that he was a great teammate. Why? Because the guys in the room like Jimmy G, and they want to hear John Lynch give him his flowers to some degree. Um, and then, and then the fact of the matter is, Jimmy played at times hurt, and so he said he admired his toughness. But then when he said it's probably run its course, that kind of says that, you know what, we could bring him back, but a lot's happened here in the relationship, and it's probably just best if Jimmy moves on. Jimmy, he didn't get into all the details, but we all know the details. Jimmy wants to be the starter. He's not going to be the starter here. And that's really it. He deserves to go out in a league where there's probably 15, good or set quarterbacks, let's say. But the rest of the league, there's 10 or 12 teams that are out there that are always looking for guys, and Jimmy could play for probably half of those teams. So there's probably 5 or 6 teams around the league that Jimmy could choose from, and why not? So good for Jimmy and good for Lynch to kind of do what Shanahan didn't do. Shanahan was bitter and kind of pissed, and I'm not saying that he didn't have a reason to be bitter and pissed, but that's how he came across, and that's probably because that's how he was. And I think now a little bit more time has passed. John's a little bit more gracious. John's, taking the high road. John's a great face of the franchise. And he said he came across perfectly for the locker room, perfectly for, slamming the door shut on anybody who would suggest, and people have, that Jimmy G could return to the 49ers. He's like, love Jimmy, admire him, good luck to him. He's going to play well elsewhere, but it's run its course. Door slam shut. Goodbye, Jimmy G. So that was the first one. That was interesting. Then we got an update on Brock Purdy, and that was the one that I think most of us care the most about. On Brock Purdy, he basically said we're doing a lot of praying and suggested that there's a wide variety of timelines and that every person's ability to heal is different, and thus they can't really have any concrete data on exactly when Brock returns and in what form. But it was also very interesting because he said Brock's out in Gilbert, Arizona. That's where his family is. And then John said that Dr. Meister, who is the surgeon, he's the Texas Rangers orthopedist, that he's worked on many elbows, and it was his decision to postpone the surgery. They wanted to wait until the swelling and the stiffness had gone away in Brock's right elbow before conducting the surgery. John also confirmed that he felt like the surgery would take place early next week. And then basically, and he said that Dr. Meister, was his call, and that, that obviously the team would have preferred that he have the surgery earlier, so that he could start rehabbing earlier, but that they were putting it in the hands of Dr. Meister. And then he referenced that Brock's a young man, 22, 23, and he's got his whole future ahead of him. And it's important that Brock feels like this is the surgery that was right for him, his elbow, and his career and his future. So I think the 49ers are playing this one totally right. You don't try to dictate terms on this. You don't want him to wait until it's going to burn you and he's going to be out for the whole year. But if you're just saying, hey, we wanted to get this done on February the 22nd, and instead he thinks it's, first week in March, you know what? You defer to the surgeon, right? I mean, he's a specialist. He's the one who went to med school. He's the one that's seen a bunch of different elbows. He's the one that understands how these athletes recover or don't recover. So to side with the surgeon, I think is really, really smart. And now we're just going to find out how long it takes. And John said, we're praying, for good results. And then when he was asked about what kind of time frame Brock was going to be on to return, John said, hey, there's a variety of time frames on Purdy's return, and that he would not tie himself in to any particular timeline, which I think is also smart. The other thing that he discussed was, he was asked about a third quarterback coming in, and he said that the 49ers may have to look into the quarterback market. And I think that they probably will. Now, and then he also mentioned how the NFL internally is discussing plans to utilize a third quarterback. So I think that, John and Kyle clearly are on the same page that I'm on, which is that you need three quarterbacks and they all better be able to play. So I expect that third quarterback to be a better player than people think. I don't know how good of a quarterback you can attract to be the third quarterback. And then we're assuming that Brock is the 1 or 2, that Trey's the 1 or 2, and that the third guy coming in is the designated 3. But what if Brock's surgery is more complicated? What if he's going to be out most of the year? Then maybe that third quarterback needs to be more like a 2. So the fact that John said that they may have to look into the quarterback market means that they're definitely looking into the quarterback market, and that they're looking for, a good quarterback. I think they're looking for the best quarterback that they can possibly afford. Now, I think the natural fit is Marcus Mariota, because I think Mariota is the right combination of size, speed, experience, availability. And I think he would benefit him to be on a team that was this talented. And then it came down to talking about Trey Lance. And I thought the Trey Lance discussion may have been the most interesting aspect of the Lynch presser today. He basically said that he's recovering well, that Trey has begun throwing, that he watches him from his office. He also said that Trey had a secondary ankle procedure, and despite that secondary ankle procedure, he's already out on the field. And he touted his character and his makeup multiple times, saying that he really loves the kid that he is. And this is something that we talked about last year in the draft process, and I kept saying it over and over again. Trey Lance is a great prospect. Why? Because he's big, strong, athletic, and he is a great kid. And that's really it. He's got the makeup. So it's like, what does that mean? That means that if there's adversity, it's all right. He's going to make it through. He's going to persevere. He's a hard worker. He's a second generation football player. This is his family business. He's not looking to do something else. This is what he wants to do, and he's going to work at it. And so John Kiss kept talking about his makeup and his character, and how when Brock Purdy came out of games, the first person he went to was Trey Lance, and that told John and Kyle a lot about Trey's character. And I think that's a great point. Trey could have been enormously disappointed once he was hurt and just kind of checked out. Hey, if it ain't about me, it ain't about me. Instead, he's there trying to help Brock, trying to contribute to the 49ers winning, because he is a high character individual. So that was really interesting to hear John Lynch talk about how they have a belief in Trey as a person, they have a belief in Trey as a player, and that his makeup and character, while they thought he had high makeup and high character coming into, the draft process and last year, that only was reaffirmed by what Trey demonstrated on the field. So that was really good to hear. But the part that to me is the most interesting aspect of today, and far and away the thing that I gravitated towards, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, but John Lynch came out I'm not saying that he said he was going to trade Trey Lance, but he kind of created a scenario in which trading Trey Lance is on the table. And when I say that, John said when he was talking about Trey, he first said he's got to play. He said that's the biggest challenge. We have a team that's ready to go right now. And then he went on to say Trey needs to get out there and play. And then he finished up by saying we very much believe in who he is as a person and who he is as a quarterback and how he talked about his character and helping out Brock. But did anybody else hear that the same way I heard that? He literally said Trey's got to play, and then said that's the biggest challenge because we have a team that's ready to go. As if to say Trey's got to play, but that's the biggest challenge because he's not ready to play. In some ways, he's got to play should not have been followed by that's the biggest challenge if Trey was going to play, right? He would have just said he's got to play, he is going to play, and here we go. Instead, he's like, he's got to play, and that's the biggest challenge. We have a team that's ready to go right now. Like Trey's got to play, but that's the challenge. He's not ready to play. And this is kind of the catch-22 behind the entire Niner thing with the quarterbacks. I think I've said the exact same thing. That Trey Lance has to play, that the 49ers have to win, and that Brock Purdy is playing at a higher level right now. So what does that mean for Trey going forward? And that's the unknown. And that's where today is really, really, really interesting, because we don't know about Brock Purdy, but it sounds like the Niners view Brock Purdy as their number one quarterback, and they're saying prayers that he's back in time for the season. Trey's got to play, but John kind of referenced that that's a challenge because they're ready to win now. And the implication is that despite the fact that Trey's got to play, that he's not ready to play at a level that helps them win now. And it sounds very James Wiseman-esque. James Wiseman needs to play, but man, we're going for a title. And now he's doubling in Detroit and rapping on the bench and feeling great, and looks like he's headed towards the next chapter in what's going to be a successful career. And the Warriors have an injured two guard who may or may not come back for the playoffs if they make it. And they've lost out on James Wiseman and his future to save a few bucks and move him down the road. It's very, very interesting. I don't know what's going to happen with Trey Lance. I don't know what's going to happen. I'll say I'm going to stay with what I've been saying all along. I love the kid. I believe in the kid. I think that he's a prospect that is going to take some time, and I don't see the 49ers giving him that time. I think they know he needs to develop. I don't think they're willing to develop him. So that's kind of why I've come to this point of like, hey, maybe it's a trade Trey Lance kind of an off season, but I don't know. I wouldn't want to make that decision. Why? Because I think Trey Lance could be really, really good at some point, and it may be a year down the line, and maybe 2 years down the line. I don't think it's 20 years down the line. I don't think it's 3 years down the line. I think he needs some reps. I think he needs like a half a season to kind of, figure it out and make those mistakes on the field and make the adjustments. Are the Niners going to give him that half season? Based on what I heard today from John Lynch, I don't think so. I think if Brock Purdy is healthy, Brock Purdy's the starter. So it's going to be interesting to see who they bring in as this third quarterback. Is it a third quarterback who's truly a third quarterback? Or is it a third quarterback who very easily could be the two? Because I expect them to bring in that quarterback first. And once that quarterback's in, and once they get a handle on where Brock's elbow is at, then and only then, maybe in April, maybe in the draft, I think they're going to consider moving Trey. I'm not rooting for it because I still think you're getting pennies on the dollar compared to what Trey's going to be worth someday. But we don't know what somebody's going to offer. Maybe Tennessee offers a top 12 pick and a player. Who knows? I think Rand Carthon would be smart to do that. I think Trey's quite a bit better than Tannehill and Malik Willis. And if you're the 49ers and you could turn that into Michael Mayer, the Notre Dame tight end, man, and let's say you signed to Marcus Mariota, maybe that's the route to go. But all I would say to anybody, go back and watch John Lynch's comments again today. He was very clear about Jimmy Garoppolo. We admire Jimmy. It's run its course. Bye-bye, Jimmy. With Brock Purdy, we're saying prayers. He very much sounds like he is foremost in their thinking. And with Trey, he's got to play. That's the biggest challenge. We have a team that's ready to go. That if he's ready to play and he's got to play, then that's not a challenge. That's a fit. But he's got to play. That's the biggest challenge. We got a team that's ready to go. The implication is he's got to play and he's not ready to go. And that's why that's a big challenge, because we have a team that's ready to go. If I'm misreading that, I'm misreading that. But that's the way I read it. And I think if the Niners go sign a third quarterback that's a true third, then it's probably Brock and Trey and that third quarterback. But if by chance they sign a Marcus Mariota, maybe Marcus comes here as the 3, but he's really going to be the 2, and you may see a draft day trade that sends Trey Lance elsewhere. I'm not rooting for it. I'm not predicting it. I'm just saying he's got to play. That's the biggest challenge. We have a team that's ready to go. Sounds like John Lynch is suggesting that Trey's not ready to go. And that's why that's a challenge. Hope you enjoyed the Krug Show, the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show video. We'll have more videos on the Niners, Giants, and Warriors in the days, weeks, and months ahead. Thanks for supporting the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show on YouTube.